My name is Amanda Morgan. I was 34 years old, living in a house I had helped pay for, loving a man I had supported through nearly a decade of struggle, when my entire life was reorganized without my permission. I remember how the kitchen light looked that evening. Warm and yellow. I remember the smell of the meal I had started in the slow cooker that morning. I remember stepping through the front door and feeling something wrong before I even saw anything. Jason was standing at the kitchen table. His mother, Gloria, sat beside him with her hands folded neatly in her lap and a small, satisfied smile on her face. The papers were stacked in the center of the table. Neat. Deliberate. Final. Jason picked them up and held them out to me. He did not say hello. He did not say he was sorry. He simply looked at me with the calm expression of someone completing a task they had prepared for. He said, "You're holding me back, Amanda. I want a divorce." I looked past him into the living room and saw boxes. Taped, labeled, stacked against the wall. My clothes. My books. My things. All of it packed and ready before I even walked through the door. 9 years of my life, sitting in cardboard boxes. And Gloria kept smiling. The next morning I learned the real reason. Jason had been promoted 2 weeks earlier. Not just any promotion. He had been named Executive Vice President of Operations at his company. It was a title that came with a corner office, a company car, an expense account, and a social circle that apparently required a different kind of wife. I had not known about the promotion when it happened. Jason had not told me. He had celebrated with colleagues while I made dinner at home, not knowing that the version of his life that included me had already been quietly closed. Gloria did not hide her opinion. When I called her trying to understand what was happening, she answered on the second ring as though she had been waiting. She told me Jason had worked hard to get where he was. She said a man in his new position needed someone who matched his success. Someone polished and ambitious and impressive in the right rooms. Then she paused, and in that silence I understood exactly what she was about to say. She said it anyway. "He deserves more than someone like you, Amanda." I hung up the phone and sat in my car in the parking lot of the apartment I had moved into 2 days after being thrown out. The person I had built a life around had decided I was an obstacle. I found out about her through a photograph. 5 days after Jason handed me the divorce papers, I opened a social media app and saw it. Jason was standing at a rooftop restaurant with his arm around a woman who was everything I was not, at least by the standards of the world he had decided to enter. Her name was Tara Weston. She had over 400,000 followers. Her profile was all perfect lighting, designer outfits, and carefully crafted captions about living with intention. She looked exactly like the kind of woman Gloria would have chosen for Jason if she had been given the chance to cast the role herself. The photo had been posted that same night. 5 days after the divorce papers. 5 days after the boxes and the kitchen table and the words "You're holding me back." He was already in photographs with her, his arm around her waist, smiling the relaxed smile of someone who had not just ended a marriage. I sat with my phone and did the math that most people do when they see a picture like that. The timeline of it. The planning. The overlap. 5 days was not how long they had been together. 5 days was just how long it took him to stop pretending otherwise. 3 weeks after the divorce filing, Gloria organized a family gathering. She did not invite me, but she invited people who had known me for years. Cousins I had cooked for. Aunts who had hugged me at Christmas. People I had thought of as mine. I found out from Caleb, Jason's younger brother, who sent me a brief warning, "Don't come, it won't be kind." But I had left a jacket there. A small excuse. I drove over on a Sunday afternoon and knocked on Gloria's back door, which the family always used. Nobody answered. The door was unlocked, so I stepped in to get what I came for. That was when I heard them. Gloria's voice from the dining room, loud and completely comfortable. She was telling someone that Amanda had always been dead weight. That Jason had carried me financially for years. The only surprise was how long it had taken him to finally do something about it. Laughter followed. Real laughter. People I had fed and celebrated with, laughing at the story of my failure as though they had been waiting to say it honestly for a long time. I walked back out without my jacket and sat in my car staring at the steering wheel. But in the corner of my mind, Something quiet and sharp had woken up. The discovery started with a number that did not add up. My attorney, Nora Keyes, was a small, precise woman with round glasses and the careful patience of someone who had seen every version of a bad divorce. She asked me to gather all financial records I could access before Jason locked me out completely. I spent 3 evenings pulling everything together. Account statements, tax returns, shared investment records, savings summaries. I laid them across my kitchen table and looked at them the way you look at a puzzle that should make sense but refuses to. The number that kept bothering me was in our joint savings account. 18 months earlier, the balance had been healthy, steadily growing. The kind of number that makes you feel secure without thinking about it too hard. Then, beginning about 11 months ago, the balance had quietly and consistently dropped. Not in one large withdrawal that would trigger a notice. In smaller amounts, spread across regular intervals, each one carefully below the reporting threshold. Patient. Planned. Invisible. By the time Jason handed me the divorce papers, the account held less than $800. There had been no large purchase I knew about. No emergency. No explanation. He had moved the money somewhere else. Quietly, methodically, and long before I suspected a single thing was wrong. Nora called me on a Tuesday morning with the careful voice she used when something was serious. She said she had been reviewing Jason's financial disclosures from the divorce proceedings and found what she described as irregularities. That was the word she used. Said in the neutral tone of someone who actually means something much stronger. I drove to her office that afternoon. She laid a printed summary across her desk and simply pointed and explained. Jason had submitted financial disclosures that reflected a much lower total than his income and known investment suggested. There were gaps in the documentation. References to accounts that appeared in one record and disappeared from another. A real estate investment that had not been disclosed at all. Nora said, "His hiding assets, Amanda. This is not sloppy paperwork." She explained this was a legal violation. Deliberately concealing assets during divorce proceedings was fraud. She had already filed a formal request for complete financial records and expected resistance. She was right about the resistance. Jason's attorneys responded within hours with objections and delays. I looked at Nora across her clean desk and understood something clearly for the first time. Jason had not just decided he wanted a different life. He had engineered this separation carefully, over many months, making absolutely certain I would walk away with as little as possible. This was never a personal disappointment. It was a calculated theft. The week after Nora filed the asset disclosure request, 3 of our joint accounts were frozen. Jason's attorneys had requested the freeze, claiming the accounts were under active dispute. It was legal. It was strategic. And it left me with almost nothing to work with while the process crawled slowly forward. I was staying in a rented room I could barely afford. A car payment was coming due. I was calculating groceries down to individual dollars. I had always worked, always contributed, always paid my share of everything we had. But so much of our financial life had been woven together that pulling apart the threads left me holding very little. That was the week I sat on the edge of my bed in that rented room and felt something I had not felt since I was young and just starting from nothing. Completely alone. Completely uncertain of what came next. I did not cry. I was too tired for that. Then my laptop chimed. An email notification. The sender address was a long string of random letters and numbers, the kind someone uses when they do not want to be found. The subject line contained only 4 words. I know what Jason did. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened the email and read every word twice before I moved again. The email was careful and brief. The sender said they were a former employee at Jason's company. They could not identify themselves yet because they feared professional consequences. But they had information about how Jason earned his promotion, and the information was documented and provable. They said one more thing that made me read the whole message a 3rd time. They said Jason had not built what everyone thought he had built. I wrote back through the anonymous address immediately. I said I was listening. I said I would not push for their identity before they were ready. I asked what they wanted me to do with the information once I had it. They replied within the hour. They said they wanted nothing for themselves. They had left the company 6 months ago after watching something wrong happen and feeling unable to stop it. They had seen the news coverage of Jason's promotion and spent months deciding whether to speak. Then they read a brief mention of our divorce in a business column and decided the time had come. They said they would send documents through a secure link. I would need to look at them carefully and decide for myself what to do. The link arrived 20 minutes later. I opened it with my hands steady and my mind completely clear. The documents took 2 full hours to get through the first time. There were internal project files, email chains, presentation records, and a detailed timeline. The more I read, the colder I felt. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I was watching a pattern form in front of me that explained things I had never understood. Jason's promotion had been built on a project called the Hartwell Initiative, a major operational restructuring plan presented to the company's leadership board 14 months ago. The plan was praised by the board, credited with saving the company's northern division, and used as the primary reason for Jason's appointment to executive vice president. The emails told an entirely different story. The Hartwell Initiative had been designed, developed, and written almost entirely by a team of 3 analysts. Their names appeared on every internal draft, every working session, every revision. Their late nights. Their strategies. Their language. Jason's name appeared on the final version submitted to the board. His name only. He had not attended most of the working sessions. 2 emails showed him asking a team member to summarize the entire plan the night before the board presentation. He had taken their work and handed it to the board as his own achievement. The promotion was not earned. It was stolen. A few days after reading through the documents, I called Priya. Priya had been my closest friend for 11 years. The one I reached for when things got hard. The one who had stood beside me at my wedding. The one who knew everything real about my marriage. I called her because I needed her steady voice. I needed the kind of honest friendship that helps you think clearly when everything around you is shifting. She answered on the 3rd ring and immediately said she had been meaning to call me. Her voice sounded nervous. Then she told me. She said she had known about Tara Weston for almost a year. She had seen them together at an event and asked Jason directly. He had told her the marriage was ending anyway and asked her to say nothing. She said she did not want to hurt me. She said she had been waiting for the right moment. Silence settled on the line when she finished. I thought about every conversation we had shared across that year. Every time I had called Priya confused about why Jason felt so distant. Every time she had gently told me that relationships go through phases. Every time she sat across from me knowing exactly what was happening and choosing his silence over my truth. I said goodbye. I meant it completely. A week after ending things with Priya, I was sorting through storage boxes I had pulled from the back of a closet. I was not looking for anything in particular. I was simply trying to organize the fragments of a life that no longer had its original shape. Then I found a green folder I had not opened in 6 years. Inside it was a business plan I had written when I was 28. It was for a consulting firm focused on helping small businesses manage their operations and supply chains. I had spent 4 months building it out carefully. Market research. Financial projections. A full service structure. Even a rough logo sketch penciled into the corner of one page. I had abandoned it 2 months after finishing it. Jason had been offered an opportunity around that time, a chance to lead a new division that could change his career. He said it would require his full focus and that things would be easier if I stayed in my current position rather than launching something uncertain. I had believed him. I had folded the green folder into a box and told myself I would return to it when the time was right. The time had not come. I sat on the floor of my small rented room, holding 6-year-old pages, and asked myself for the very first time what my life might have looked like if I had chosen it first. I decided to build the business. Not only out of necessity, though money was genuinely tight. Not purely out of spite, though some of that existed too if I was being honest with myself. I decided to build it because those 6-year-old pages had reminded me that I had always been capable of more than the life I had been living inside. I told Gloria first, not because I wanted her approval, but because I knew she would tell Jason and I wanted him to hear it from someone else. She found out when I mentioned it briefly to Caleb during a short phone call. She called me that same evening. She said it with the kind of smile you can actually hear through a phone. She said, "Oh, Amanda. That is honestly the cutest little midlife crisis I have ever heard of. You, running a business." She laughed. I heard Jason's voice somewhere in the background. His laugh joined hers. I said nothing. I thanked her politely for her feedback and ended the call. Then I opened my laptop and began writing an updated version of the plan. The research was 6 years old, but my understanding of operations and supply chains was sharper now than it had ever been. I had spent 9 years watching Jason's career closely enough to learn everything he had never been willing to teach me directly. I put all of that knowledge to work. The first real client came 2 months after I registered the business. His name was Walter Osei, a man in his early 60s who ran a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been struggling with vendor delays and inventory problems for over a year. Someone had told him I could help. I put together a proposal, presented it in a small conference room with 3 of his managers watching, and answered every question they asked in the clearest language I knew. I did not oversell. I did not stretch my experience. I told him exactly what I would do and precisely why it would work. He signed a 3-month contract that afternoon. I sat in my car afterward feeling something I had not felt in a very long time. Not relief. Something cleaner and more solid than relief. The deep satisfaction of a door opening because I had knocked on it myself. Then I thought about the question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the meeting was first arranged. Someone had recommended me to Walter Osei. I had not asked during the meeting because I did not want to seem inexperienced. But that evening I sent a brief professional thank you email and gently asked how he had first heard of my firm. His reply arrived the next morning. He said a woman named Claudia Merritt had told him I was exceptional. The name stopped me completely. Claudia Merritt had been a senior vice president at Jason's company until 18 months ago, when she quietly resigned. I had met her once, briefly, at a company dinner years before. The kind of introduction you forget before you reach the parking lot. But she had been composed and precise and clearly someone who chose every word deliberately. I called the number Walter had provided. Claudia answered immediately. She said she had been expecting my call. She told me she had resigned after watching Jason take credit for the Hartwell initiative and understanding that the company's leadership would never hold him accountable for it. She had been quietly building documentation for months before leaving. She told me she had followed the news of our divorce and made a careful decision. She believed in making sure the right people had what they needed to protect themselves. She had already been in contact with Nora. She had also reached out to the 3 analysts whose work had created the Hartwell initiative. 2 were willing to give formal statements. 1 had kept every original draft file with timestamps perfectly intact. Claudia told me to stay patient. She said the truth was a slow-moving thing, but it carried more momentum than most people understood. Then she said, "Keep building your business, Amanda. You are going to need something solid to stand inside when all of this is over." Jason gave a magazine interview 3 months into the divorce proceedings. He wore a light grey suit in the photograph. He was standing beside his office window looking thoughtful and slightly tired, exactly the image someone chooses when they want to appear like a man carrying a dignified burden. The article described him as a rising executive navigating personal challenges with focus and professionalism. Near the end, there was a careful paragraph about his marriage. Written with enough distance to seem neutral but clearly enough to land its message. It described a difficult partnership that had held him back professionally. A spouse who had struggled to grow alongside him. He never used my name. He did not have to. People who knew us understood exactly who the struggling partner was meant to be. I read the article twice. Then I opened a new document and began writing a professional, factual account of 9 years inside that marriage. Not an attack. Not a public accusation. A clear, dated record of events, decisions, and outcomes. The kind of document that exists to correct the record if the record is ever challenged. I shared the document with Nora and Claudia. Then I posted 1 single sentence on my professional profile page. It said, "Some stories are told by the wrong person. The right one is still writing hers." Over the next 6 weeks, I collected everything. Nora guided the legal process carefully. Claudia worked her own network of contacts with the precision of someone who had spent decades inside corporate environments and understood exactly how accountability moved through them. My work was smaller and more personal. I went back through 9 years of emails, messages, and saved documents looking for every moment where the real record conflicted with Jason's version of events. Money he had claimed to manage alone that I had actually tracked and maintained in spreadsheets. Projects at his company he had discussed with me at home in ways that showed clearly he did not fully understand them himself. Decisions he had received praise for that I had helped him think through at our kitchen table while he paced and I took the notes. I was not building ammunition for a public fight. I was constructing a complete, documented, factual picture of what had actually existed between us. Nora told me evidence does not need to be loud to be powerful. She said the most effective truth is quiet, organized, and completely impossible to dismiss. I kept that in mind with every single piece I added. Jason, as far as I could tell, had no idea any of it was being assembled around him. The cracks inside Jason's company started appearing publicly in the 4th month. I heard about it first from Claudia, who still had trusted contacts inside the organization. She said 3 members of the Hartwell Initiative team had stopped being quiet. Not through formal public statements, not yet. But in the way that information moves inside a company. Carefully, specifically, and always to exactly the right ears. 2 senior employees resigned within the same week. Both cited professional reasons in their official letters. Neither said anything specific in public. But the resignations were noticed by everyone who understood how to read them. People inside a company always hear what is not said in a resignation letter as clearly as what is. Then an investor connected to Jason's division began asking pointed questions about the origins of the Hartwell Initiative. He had heard something from someone he trusted and wanted to understand what exactly he was invested in. Jason's response, from what I was told, was smooth and confident. He gave polished reassurances with the ease of someone who had been doing it for a long time. But reassurance only works when doubt is still small. These questions came from someone who was already looking for answers somewhere else. The building was shaking because of cracks that had always been there. I had simply stopped filling them. Jason announced his engagement to Tara Weston on a Thursday morning. Both of their social media pages posted simultaneously. The photographs were professionally taken and clearly planned well in advance. Tara's ring was large enough to be clearly visible even in a small screen. Gloria commented within minutes with strings of celebratory words that made it obvious she had known for some time. I looked at the announcement for about 30 seconds. Then I closed the app and went back to a client proposal I was finishing. What I found genuinely interesting was not the engagement itself. It was what Claudia sent me 4 hours later. She had been doing her own quiet research into Tara Weston. Not from personal curiosity but because Claudia was the kind of person who investigated everything connected to a situation she was carefully tracking. She had found something and believed I should see it. It was a set of direct messages between Tara and another man. Not obtained improperly. They had been screenshot and shared publicly by a third party in an open forum. The kind of thing that happens when someone who was already wronged decides they have nothing left to protect. The other man was wealthy. Significantly wealthier than Jason. The messages were affectionate, recent, and made very clear that this other relationship had not ended when Tara accepted Jason's proposal. I looked at those messages for a long time. The man Tara was communicating with was named Franklin Ashby. He was a real estate developer with investments across 4 states and a following that made Tara's look modest. His profile featured private planes and coastal properties and the particular ease of someone who had never needed to perform ambition because the results were always visible anyway. The messages between them were recent. Several were dated within the same week as Jason's engagement announcement. Tara's tone in those messages was completely different from her polished public voice. She was not performing for an audience. She sounded calculating in a way that was almost businesslike. She referred to Jason by name and used language that suggested their entire relationship was temporary infrastructure rather than something she had any real investment in. I thought about Jason standing at that kitchen table, so certain of his own careful calculations. He had taken 9 years of my life and exchanged it for someone who was doing to him precisely what he had done to me, treating a person as a useful arrangement until something better and shinier became available. I will be honest. I did not feel satisfied when I understood that. I felt something quieter. The specific sadness of watching someone step confidently into the exact trap they had spent years building for someone else. I told no one about Franklin Ashby except Nora, who filed it carefully into the evidence folder without comment. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a grey Tuesday morning. Nora had prepared with the kind of thoroughness that made me understand exactly why I had chosen her. She had submitted a formal request for complete financial disclosure backed by every piece of evidence Claudia, the analysts, and I had worked to assemble. Jason's attorneys had spent weeks filing objections and requesting delays. Nora had anticipated and countered every single one without any visible frustration. I sat at the courtroom table feeling none of the things I had expected. No fear. No anger that I could not manage. Just a quiet steadiness, the kind that settles in when you have done everything correctly and you are prepared for whatever comes. Nora presented the hidden assets first. The concealed accounts. The undisclosed real estate investment. The financial records show a steady, deliberate reduction of joint funds beginning 11 months before any divorce papers were filed. Jason's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Then Nora presented the Hartwell Initiative documentation. She framed it precisely within its legal relevance. Jason's fraudulent professional conduct had directly affected the accurate representation of his standing and earnings in the financial disclosures. The courtroom went very still. Jason's attorney asked immediately for a recess. The judge granted 5 minutes. I looked straight ahead and let Nora do exactly what I had hired her to do. The truth inside Jason's company did not collapse loudly. It deflated. In the weeks following the hearing, formal statements from the Hartwell Initiative analysts were submitted to the court as supporting documentation. Through a careful chain that Claudia managed responsibly and without drama, they also reached the right senior figures inside the company. The board received a detailed summary. An internal review was opened quietly. These are small things on the surface, internal reviews. But inside a company they are never truly small. The people who had always suspected something was wrong began saying so now that speaking felt safer than staying silent. 2 senior members repositioned themselves away from Jason's division within the month. Not dramatically. The careful kind of movement that happens when experienced people decide a particular investment is no longer worth its risk. Investors began asking questions. Not aggressively, but with the persistent precision of people who have been given a reason to look more closely at something they had trusted too quickly. Jason went still on social media. The confident captions and polished photographs simply stopped appearing 1 week and never came back. I heard from Caleb once. He called to say things were difficult and that he was sorry. I thanked him and did not press for details. I had work. Walter had referred me to 2 more clients. My days were full of real, solid effort that belonged entirely to me. The noise from Jason's world reached me less and less each week. The wedding was set for a Saturday in early spring. I knew about it because Gloria had invited Caleb, and Caleb had mentioned it to me without realizing how much I already understood about the full situation beneath it. He sounded genuinely hopeful that things would calm down once everyone was settled. I did not tell Caleb about Franklin Ashby. That was not my story to release and not my timing to choose. From what I heard afterward, through Caleb and one other source I trusted, the morning started exactly as planned. The venue was expensive and perfectly arranged. Gloria arrived dressed and positioned like a woman standing at the center of a long-awaited victory. Jason came looking confident in the particular way of someone who had been rehearsing it for months. Then, somewhere during the quiet time between the ceremony and the reception, something happened with Tara's phone. A guest had seen the messages between Tara and Franklin Ashby. A quiet conversation started at one table. Then slightly louder conversation spread across the room. Then came the specific silence that tells everyone nearby something has gone deeply and publicly wrong. Tara's expression shifted completely. Gloria tried to manage the room with the practiced skill of someone who had controlled narratives for years. Jason moved through the venue looking for Tara. Tara was in a side hallway having a perfectly calm conversation with Franklin Ashby on her phone while the guests waited at their tables. Everything fell within 90 days of the wedding. The internal review at Jason's company concluded with findings that could not be softened or reframed. He had misrepresented the origins of the Hartwell Initiative to the leadership board. Several supporting emails had been altered after the fact. The board voted to remove him from the executive vice president position. The announcement came on a Friday afternoon through a brief, formal statement that said almost nothing and communicated everything. The engagement to Tara ended when she posted a statement about choosing to prioritize her personal journey forward. She did not mention Jason's name. The comments on her post filled in everything her careful words left out. Jason's legal team contacted Nora and requested settlement discussions rather than continuing proceedings in court. The settlement Nora secured included a significant portion of the assets Jason had tried to hide, plus compensation calculated from the accurate full value of his former position and the years of financial contribution I had made. The number was fair. More than fair. It was what 9 years of real, steady partnership actually looked like when someone stopped pretending it had been worth nothing. Gloria's social media, which had celebrated the engagement with so much noise, went completely silent. Former allies stopped calling. The polished world Jason had carefully constructed on borrowed foundations simply stopped pretending to hold together. Jason came to my office. My business had moved out of the spare room and into a clean, functional space near downtown. 2 employees. A client list that had grown steadily across 10 months. I had not decorated it to impress anyone. It was organized and efficient, which was exactly what I was. He knocked on the glass door on a Wednesday morning and I let him in because I was not afraid of him anymore. He looked genuinely tired. Not the performed weariness from the magazine photograph. The real kind. Worn down in the way of someone who has been running on a story that finally ran out. He started with something close to an apology, though it circled the actual words without quite landing on them. He talked about pressure and mistakes and how things had moved faster than he had been able to control. He said he had not intended for it to become what it became. Then he asked if there was any way I could help him. He still had industry contacts, he said, and I was building something real. He thought maybe there was a path forward that could benefit both of us. I looked at him across my desk. I remembered the man I had first known at 24. Earnest and uncertain. Full of ideas he did not yet know how to execute. I had believed in that man with everything I had. That man had made a series of careful, deliberate choices to become someone else entirely. I told Jason no. Not with cruelty. Not with a prepared speech or a list of grievances I had been saving for this exact moment. I simply told him I could not help him, that I genuinely wished him well in a general and honest sense, and that the door was behind him. He left. I stood at the window of that small office and watched him walk to his car. I felt nothing dramatic. Just the clean, settled feeling of a decision made correctly and without regret. The woman Jason had thrown out of her own life was standing inside a business she had built from a 6-year-old folder found on the floor of a rented room. She had employees who respected her work. Clients who sent her referrals. A reputation built entirely on something that belonged only to her. Gloria called once, a month later, with a softer voice than I had ever heard from her. She said things had not gone the way anyone expected. I said I understood completely. I did not invite her to continue the conversation. My name was on the door of that office. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's daughter-in-law. Not as someone's quiet support system standing just outside the frame of the photograph. Just Amanda Morgan. Alone and completely enough. The man who said I was holding him back had needed me far more than he ever admitted. The woman he threw away had simply decided, finally and without a single drop of bitterness, to keep herself instead. If you feel the sting of betrayal, don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now, because every week, I unravel a new chapter in this journey of revenge. You won't want to miss it.